You're listening to Witch Wednesdays, a semi-weekly podcast source for all things witchcraft in the modern world. Join your host, Steph, on Wednesday mornings to chat about seasons, Sabbats, and all new witchcraft topics to help you make your life more magical. Welcome back to Witch Wednesdays. I'm Steph, and I have a guest here with me today to chat about a couple different things. So I am going to turn it over to them so they can introduce themselves and let you know where you can find them online.
Well, hi. I am Kamden Cornell. You can find me at heart_n_vine_apothecary on Instagram, and then heartandvineapothecary.com. That is my personal website.
Wonderful. The main reason we are going to be chatting today is going to be that you just wrote your most recent book, The Tameless Path. And before we get into that, I would love to ask sort of where you got started on your journey that led to everything that you do, I'm going to say, because folk witch and you're working with plants and all of this. Where did that sort of start for you that led ultimately to you being an author?
Okay. So I grew up in an occult household. My
Ooh.
grandfather studied Kabbalah. He was a Mason. Um, he was an alchemist. He was an astrologer. Like we always had occultism and occult philosophy in our house. Um, my grandmother was a psychic, so she would do like they weren't really tarot readings. They were cartomancy, but cards of her own making. So they were like index cards with stickers and things that she had drawn on, and there was this big pile of them that she would flip over and read.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, it was actually really a very interesting, cool childhood, full of magic. Um, and so I was always sort of in it. Then in like middle school, probably, so like mid 90s, uh, I got deeper into witchcraft. When I was about 8, my grandpa got a book from like Time Life. I think it's just called Witches and Witchcraft. It was part of this big series, but the cover image was like this beautiful woman with a crescent crown holding a dagger in a cup, and it was just very alluring. And all of the imagery in the book was very alluring. And I had like I just loved gathering sticks and cool stuff. My grandma would always take us to go crystal shopping and like find the crystal that speaks to your soul and that kind of stuff. Um,
Love it.
yeah, it was really fun. And so all of the images in this book were just really speaking to me. And my grandparents actually told me not to get involved with witchcraft because it was a bad thing. Um, which I disregarded because everything in that book was just too cool. So I started reading everything I possibly could. Like at our elementary school, we had a very large mythology section and folklore. Um, in our middle school library, we had a big section on folklore. And so I just started reading everything I could. Uh, got really into witchcraft. And then, yeah, it just kind of evolved from there. Later on in life, I went to massage school where I met my first herbalism mentor, who is a curandera local to Albuquerque. Her name is Bernadette. And she was actually the first person to get me interested in invasive plants because she said the medicine that you need grows near to you. Like, open your front door, the medicine you need will be there. And at the time, that we met, I was just coming out of anorexia. Like I was just getting over a pretty severe eating disorder. And the plant that popped up that was growing right next to me was a plant called London Rocket, which is a type of mustard. And it really helps with digestion and appetite. Um, it's a nice, like, I didn't know it at the time, but it's a nice Martian plant that gets things moving and like steals your resolve. Um, and so I just started researching it and eating it, and then got really interested in all of the other plants growing out of cracks in the sidewalk. Like, what are all of those? And started building a relationship with plants that I came to know as plants that other people didn't really like, as invasives or weeds. Um, but I really liked learning about it. And that is where I started specializing as an herbalist, as working with invasives. And then probably 5 years after that, I met a couple of my best friends, Sebastian and Robin, who own a business here called Dryland Wilds. And they use trail trimmings and invasives in what they do. And so we started talking about like the philosophy behind using invasives and like permaculture and building our relationship around that. And I don't know, it just kind of blossomed into this true love of invasive plants and weeds. um, and then I just proposed the book topic to Blake Malloway at Crossed Crow, and bada bing, bada boom. They liked it.
I was going to say, I don't think, because I've read quite a bit on herbalism and plant life, and I don't think I've ever seen anything that was specifically about invasive plants.
Yeah, especially in the magical community. I think really the only one that really like comes to mind as a book on invasive or unwanted plants is Corinne Boyer's The Bramble Arch.
Oh, interesting. I don't think I've read that one.
Oh, it's so good. Everything by Corinne Boyer is amazing. So
Well, I love that this is going to be available because invasive invasive plants are sort of my favorite, just out of sheer laziness in tending my garden. I'm like, you know what? I love dandelions. They're my new favorite thing because
yeah,
they're going to be here forever. I'm not doing anything about it anymore.
they 100% will be there forever. Like,
Yep. And there's like so many what people are calling weeds that will just like pop up in the grass in the garden. And I'm like, they're here for now.
there it is.
There's nothing I'm going to do about it. I love them. So we might as well embrace
Right.
it.
The house that I live in now is the house my dad grew up in. And like my grandma, like we moved in after my grandmother passed away. And she had this lawn that they had tried so hard to take care of for like so many years, and it was struggling along. Um, and then when we moved in, like, I don't like lawns. I don't like grass, honestly. Like that kind of grass, not a big fan. Um, and they had tried to seed it with so many different kinds, like it was Bermuda and Blue Grandma and like so many, that it just was kind of struggling. And so I let it go. And now our lawn is like dandelions and viper grass and prickly wild lettuce, plantain, clover. Like there's all kinds of really cool. It's basically a meadow now. And I love it. I don't want it to change.
That sounds beautiful. I prefer that too. I'm not a big fan of lawns and lawn maintenance. It's just a water sucking resource. And
Oh my
I
God. It
just
is
have
such
so
a
many issues with lawns and our own lawn. And it's not fun.
it is a big pain in the butt for no reason. It's a 50s holdover. We don't need it anymore.
So if somebody were, just tuning into this and they were like, oh, invasive plants, like what can I do? I have a lot of dandelions. What does that mean? What can they expect to get out of your book?
So, the book itself. Oh my gosh, you want me to talk about the book I just wrote? Um, so, what you can expect to find about invasives, I wrote monographs for a bunch of them. Um, and it talks about how to use them for magic, but also for medicine and for food. And so the book has a lot of like culinary recipes. Like there's a recipe in there for chocolate chip cookies using Russian olive fruits.
What?
There is a Russian olive gazpacho recipe. There's a pasta recipe, like how to make noodles from scratch using in Siberian elm leaves or seed pods, if that's the samaras, if that's what you want. So there's a lot of that. Like, how do you actually get it in your body safely and enjoyably so that you actually are using an invasive plant on a more regular basis. But then there's also information on how to use it for magic. So, like in the Siberian elm section, there's one on avoiding slander. Also, like, I don't want to call it sin eating. It's called insufflation, but it's it's like sucking spirits out of a person
Oh.
using like a straw, but making that straw type tool, an insufflation wand, out of elm. Um, there's a lot of like different charms, like how to use wild mustard seed for abundance, like all kinds of that kind of stuff. And then definitely monographs for how to use them for like herbal medicine, because a lot of the plants that we deem invasive or unwanted have actually been essential parts of materia medica for our ancestors, and were considered like common but very valuable plants. So it's kind of a book that asks you to reconsider your values around what we would call weeds. So I guess in a way it's kind of Nietzschean in that way. I don't.
So would this be something that can be used by beginners if they have not previously picked up an herbalism book?
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually a fairly large section on possible preparations and then how to prepare things. So like there's an aqueous infusion section and how to infuse oils, and then it goes into like how to make salves and poultices and plasters, and like you can really understand how to do things. Then there's a magical preparation section that goes into like alchemy. There's a whole alchemy and astrology slash plant magic section that goes pretty in detail. So I think that if you're a beginner, you're going to be able to use the book and really get something out of it, feel like you learned. And even for fairly advanced practitioners, I think people are going to find some neat stuff, especially because not everybody writes about weeds.
Yeah, that's true. It does not come up often. And I think it'll be a particularly helpful resource for, first of all, broke witches,
Yeah,
because I mean, you don't
definitely.
need to be sourcing expensive herbs from halfway across the country. You are just walking outside,
Yeah,
gathering them.
right.
And also for urban witches. I myself am in Chicago, and I know that that comes up a lot. That people are like, well, where's the nature? I'm like, well, it exists, and weeds grow everywhere. They grow in the sidewalk cracks, like you said. So,
Yeah, exactly. In my like I teach classes on plant ID, foraging, and survival here in Albuquerque, and every year I do what I call an urban walk, like HERBAN because it's cute. But we do like a little urban forage, and we go out and like walk through parks and down alleyways and just like what's there. And how do you know that that's that plant, and what can you use it for? And if I were like stranded somewhere, is there something like some way that I could get water and also food? And
oh, I
like it's
love
pretty
that.
interesting because once you start keying into it, like there are ways to take care of yourself and for the land to take care of you, even in the middle of the biggest city.
I am fascinated by that topic. I'm always finding myself like looking up survivalist stuff, even though if it came down to it, I'm one of those that would just like I'll be dead immediately. I'm okay with it. Like but I love researching about it, and I'm like, there's this part of me that's like, yes, I could totally hack it in the forest and live for years, and then I'm like, no, absolutely not. I need DoorDash and Amazon.
Right?
But I do find it a very fascinating topic, and it is something that I love seeing what's out there and learning to live with the nature that I have around instead of trying to fight with it.
Oh yeah. And I think it's so cool because like another part of the book is just tuning into the land, like as an entity. Like I'm an animist and I write from an animistic perspective. And so how do you key into and have a conversation with nature and follow her lead? Um, Part of that is a desire on our part to take care of the land and a desire of the land to take care of us. And so we're always going to find that intersection no matter where we are. Even if you're at the top of a skyscraper, like there's still a connection to the land there. And like one of the things that I had the designers put into the book, like the layout artists, is a monograph from Michael Myers at Atalantafugians, which is an alchemical treatise. Um, but there is a woodcut in there of an alchemist who looks like a total lunatic. Like he has these giant goggles and a cane and like a lantern. But it's basically the idea that even though, like, as a limited human perspective, we're kind of like dumb and blind to a lot of things. You use the tools at your disposal to follow in the footsteps of nature. And in the woodcut, like nature is walking in front of him and he's using a cane to find her footsteps. And she's walking very confidently in the moonlight and is gorgeous. But I think, like, when it comes to invasives, uh, just following the lead of nature can be difficult because of a lot of the like political rhetoric around it. Um, but really, like invasives are helping the soil to refertilize, and they are there to like aerate the soil, and they help to bring water into places, even though some research says that they take up too much water. If you look further into it, they're actually providing um, way more than they're taking. And it's like the land trying to repair itself so that it can grow and evolve and help it take care of itself and take care of us much better. Uh, and it's interesting just to read through the research and read everybody's opinion. Like while I was doing research for this book, it would be like, well, tell me a little bit about the folklore of Siberian elm. Just Google something, and every single article is like, Siberian elm is the most evil tree on the planet. Siberian elm grows straight from hell. Like it's wild. And like in the book, I write about Tree of Heaven. And that's definitely one where people are like, tree of heaven or tree of hell, tree of heaven or tree of the devil. Like, it's just wild. And honestly, tree of heaven is one of the best, like in areas with large amounts of malaria, like high malaria rates. That tree off like trees and trees related to it grow, and people in that region have used that tree to help ease symptoms of malaria. Like it's a really strong antiviral. And, we just you know, look at it like, that weed. Like,
Yeah, there's so much lack of understanding, but these
so much.
things, like they exist in that area for a reason. And just because we want to tear everything down doesn't mean we should.
Right? And they're there because we're tearing everything down. Like, if we hadn't disturbed it, they would probably not be there. Uh, but like another part of the book is just looking into how human driven, like human activity and human driven changes to environment have made it essential that plants that we call invasive are in these areas that we have a problem with them being. Um, and like it's part of their function. And so until we change, the invasives aren't going to change. And so they're going to be there. And so why not learn how to come into relationship with them and manage them well in a way that takes care of the land? Like that's kind of why I wanted to write the book.
And I think that is just brilliant reasoning.
Oh,
Because
thank you.
it's something that comes up a lot. And I think that we don't always think about it when we are practicing herbalism or foraging outside, where we tend to be drawn to, more traditional, like colorful flowers and things, and maybe things that we planted in our own gardens. But to know what is available around us is really such an important idea and resource.
Totally. And like there's just so much. Even like so I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Um, and growing up a lot of people were upset about it, I guess. They would be like, "Where's all the green? Where's all the trees? It's just brown, brown, brown all around." Um, and it can be, sure. Like we live in a mesa, so it can be really dry. But once you start learning about the plants, all of a sudden are there is a huge amount of biodiversity all around us, even in like a quote unquote like brown dead area. There's still like so much. There's like tons of cryptantha and yerba negrita and sagebrush and saltbush, and like there's just so much around. And once you start being able to differentiate it, all of a sudden the world of the green, the natural spirit is just so present all around you all the time. And I think that's so cool.
It is. And speaking of what's around you, I also wanted to ask because this is something that comes up when I get questions about like sourcing things or buying witchcraft supplies if you don't want to make your own. And I just want to make sure listeners know that your shop sells online. So that is exciting. And you offer, I mean, tons of different things. You have like great oils and things. Is that stuff that you are sourcing from around your area?
A lot of it, yeah. So in the product that we make, we do buy some. I actually work as an apothecarist in Albuquerque Old Town, which is the oldest functioning neighborhood in the nation. We've been
Oh, wow.
functioning since 1730, which is pretty cool.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and my boss opened a little herbal there. Um, and so like I have access to that. Like we buy herbs for the herbal and I buy from them. But we also grow. I have a pretty big garden that my husband and I take care of. And then we also source from the land here in Albuquerque, um, always with reciprocity in mind, and also like usually with invasives. Like my favorite plants to gather from are Russian olive and tamarisk and dandelion. And uh, some of the plants that I wrote about in the book don't grow here. But like, in travel, I've tasted them or used them or whatever. Uh, and so I do have a relationship with them. Not everything on the website is made with everything in the book, but a lot of what is on my website has been made using invasive locally stuff.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, your oils in particular are so beautiful. I love when it's like those clear glass bottles that you can see all the different ingredients in that make me so happy.
Oh, thank you. I love them. They're they're really fun.
They are, and I that's one thing that I like to purchase from witchcraft stores more than buy. Like I just feel like I kind of make a mess when I do it. I'm like, you know what? Somebody already like sourced all of these ingredients and put them together for me, and I feel good about using it.
Well, we very much appreciate it, I'm sure.
So I just wanted listeners to know that because a lot of listeners don't have local stores and don't always know where to purchase things online. So it's lovely that you ship everywhere.
Oh, thank you. And on that topic, I am teaching a class this Saturday for Salem Witch Fest.
Oh,
um, on how to make an oil inspired by Crown of Success, but using invasives.
oh,
And so it's not like a traditional Crown of Success, but it is very much inspired by and using like Russian olive and dandelion, um, bindweed, which I love. Bindweed is one of my favorite plants. So yeah, if people want to tune in, I'm sure that there's still room.
oh, I love that. That's exciting.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
And for those that are located maybe near Albuquerque, you do teach classes in person as well.
I do. From May to September, I teach a class like the plant ID foraging and survival class, which I just call the wortcunning apprenticeships. Because we learn about like medicine and food and magic all of together, and the folklore of plants in that class, which is really fun. Um, and throughout the years, I've had students who taught me a lot too, so it's been a really cool experience. I took those over from my other mentor, Beverly McFarland, who had been teaching them for 25 years. And then her vision started going. So I inherited the classes and just kind of geared them more toward magic. Um, and it's been so much fun. And then other classes I teach, I don't have anything in the docket currently, but I do teach classes on witchcraft, like just different topics in witchcraft, whatever I'm interested in at the moment. And then tarot, I've taught classes in alchemy, energy work, exorcism, all kinds of stuff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Outside of your shop and teaching, do you have any practices that you do that's like solely for yourself on a daily or weekly, semi-regular basis?
Yeah. I consider myself an Ecatean. And so, like on the dark moon, we have ritual for Ecate doing deep non. Um, we celebrate Numenia, which is the first sliver of the moon in the sky. That's Numenia. Um, like we do a lot of Ecatean practices. I wouldn't say I have a daily practice. We touch in with each other every day, you know. Like when you have a connection to a spirit, you touch in no matter what. Um, but there is like I follow more a lunar cycle, I would say, and it's all Ecatean, with Medea and Kirke as kind of like ancestor. Like we venerate them as ancestors to the witch's path.
I was gonna say those are all like witch deities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that those all sounded familiar as being
Yeah.
particular to witchcraft and to witches.
Yeah, very particular to witchcraft. Um, and we've built a really good relationship together. And so, like, you know, I don't follow like a lot of the books and I don't know, TikToks. We don't follow the TikToks, but we follow our hearts and we have found some really great stuff along the way.
No, I mean I agree of just making it your own,
Yeah.
figuring out your own path with that.
Mhm.
I don't do any work with deities, so I'm not as familiar with it, but I did recognize those as being like particular to witches and witchcraft because I do get some questions like about that and how to get started. How did that relationship start for you?
Well, uh, I mean, like I said, when I was younger, I was really interested in mythology and I read as much as I could. Hecate didn't really come up for me until much later, after I had already been working with a different deity. And that relationship was really great. We worked together very well. And then there was a point where the deity I was working with, or the spirit I was working with, was just like, I don't want to work with you anymore. And I was like, oh, well, shit. Uh, like, all my magic wasn't working very well anymore. And like, it really felt like she was uh, pulling away. But then I had a dream where she was like, I'm going to lay some signs for you and lead you to someone else, a friend. And I was like, okay. And so over the next couple of months, I started picking up signs and like I started hearing more about Akate. And so I felt very led and introduced to her. Um, and so I started reading everything I could, especially things by like Sarita de Este. So good. Those Sarita's books are just amazing, very well written. And so from there, I recognized a lot of patterns with Medea and Kirke and how like Medea is definitely like this very powerful witch, and Kirke is definitely like a very powerful herbalist and pharmakeus. And so we were I don't know. It just kind of evolved on its own through research and through practice. And really like opening myself to just saying like, "Hey, what's up? What should we do today?" Um and then so I am also a curio collector. Like I have a lot of curios around my house and one of those is a human skull. Uh, and I started doing ritual with the skull, trying to get in touch with Medea specifically. And so now I have a whole ritual that I do uh, where an incense that I make, the smoke comes up through the skull and I breathe in that smoke. Um, and we have a conversation in that way.
Oh.
Yeah, but that evolved very organically.
And that's the best kind of practice. I like that there's, not a prescription or rule book that you're trying to follow.
Yeah. There isn't one really. Like,
Yeah, I mean, every relationship that even if people are working with the same deity, the relationships that they're going to have are going to be completely different.
yeah, totally. Like even people who are very much like I have friends here who are also Hecataean and like pretty deep into it, but our relationships are all very different. The visions we have are different. The way we see deity is different. And so like we talk to each other, we inspire each other, but our practices are all very unique and it's really, really cool.
Oh yeah, I bet to be able to compare all the different stories.
Yeah. I have a friend right now who's like molding her hands because like into 100 hands and doing this art piece.
Ooh,
But all of the art is a way to touch into Hecate and the power that Hecate wields. And her artwork is just fantastic and all inspired by deity. So
it's
I don't know,
beautiful.
it's just neat. Yeah.
Well, before we wrap up, I know we talked about a lot of beginner things, but before we end, are there any other tips that you have for beginners that we did not touch on?
Okay. Tips for beginners. Um, yeah, honestly, I mean, read as much as you can. Um, if reading is prohibitive, like watch as many videos as you can. Uh, follow your heart, follow your gut. Like your body and your spirit know the path that they want to take. And so I like when I first started with like energy work, uh, I didn't know that I had been feeling energy for my entire life, like following these patterns of energy. Um, but as I was being better trained, uh, I picked up on the fact that I had always been feeling it. I just hadn't trusted myself. And at that moment, all of a sudden, it was like this whole world opened up. And so, like, always, like, okay, I also don't want to say always check yourself, but like, uh, always be questioning, but also trusting. Like, follow your intuition and really trust yourself, follow your sovereignty. Um, and like lean into the idea that every aspect of everything that has ever happened in the world has led to this moment and to you. And you are like this unique, beautiful piece of history that only exists for this very brief moment and will never exist again. And you are so valuable. And your opinion matters too. And I think that that's something that we forget, especially in the witchcraft community.
That was beautiful and fantastic advice.
Well, thank you. I hope that it actually helps.
No, I think it will, and you're right. That is an excellent reminder. And I think that when witches are studying, we can get into our heads quite a bit,
Hmm.
especially learning about new topics and really focus on that cerebral and not as much on just trusting that you're going the right way and you are where you need to be.
And like there's a cerebral part, like do the research, do the like listen to teachers if you have one and like follow your mentors and that kind of stuff. But like also know that you are part of this story. And like I think that it's easy to forget, especially in this comparison game that we do with each other, that your part of the story is just as important as the person next to you.
That is excellent advice. Perfect place to Kamden, thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your expertise and advice and chatting about your book. That was wonderful to learn everything that I did today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was really fun to do it. And thank you for the opportunity. This is really cool.
And listeners, as always, I will have everything linked. So if you want to check out the book, check out the shop, check out the classes, everything will be linked in the show notes so you can find that easily. And that is everything that I have for you this week. I will see you all next week.
Need even more witchcraft in your life? Subscribe to Witch Wednesdays on Patreon and YouTube for all types of exclusive bonus content like spells, recipes, book reviews, and more, or even order personalized tarot readings and spells. Be sure to follow on Instagram at Witch Wednesdays Podcast, and you can find all these links and more at witchwednesdays.com.